Matt Ferguson. If only
Hi.
people could see how it takes two CTOs to set up a chat.
Yeah, but it's always the thing you haven't tested, right? It's always that way.
It's also the thing that you assume is gonna just be fine and it's taken care of, and then it's not.
All good.
So, Matt, you're the CTO at Galley Solutions.
I am.
You are a fellow 7 CTOs member. You and I both live in the East County in San Diego.
Absolutely. It's lovely East County. It's turning fall. It's starting to feel wonderful. So glad that we're out here.
And you're also a perpetual tinkerer of amazing things.
I am at that.
You've also built a natural pond.
I did, and it is full of plants right now. You can swim under the plants and just see filtering of daylight. It's amazing.
And is the water clear or murky?
Completely clear. You can drink it. You can swim with the fishes and drink the water. It's pretty amazing.
Can you catch the fish?
Well, the kids catch the fish in nets all the time and put them back in. They're goldfish.
I once had an idea for fresh fish vending. So basically a big barrel in the backyard, and then you have constantly circulating water, and then the fish swim in that, and then you push a button and then it comes and falls in, and then you have a fresh fish.
Perfect. We have fresh fish composting. It's for our garden. If a fish dies, they go get planted by a pumpkin.
Is my fresh fish vending machine idea as terrible as most people find it in your mind, or?
Well, I spent time paying for college working in Alaska, and so I've worked on the slaughter line of a fish processing plant before to pay for the first year of college, and I can tell you that from experience, it's a pretty bloody, messy job. So I'm not sure how you contain the sloppy, yucky, smelly part of that.
Post slaughter or pre-slaughter?
When the hammer comes down, man.
This definitely feels like one of those ideas that everyone's telling me is a bad idea. I should just go and do it and just try it.
You know, a lot of folks are experimenting with permaculture, and I can't say I'm a permaculturalist, but I've had a few people that have studied permaculture come see what we've set up. They're like, oh my God, we've always dreamed of this. I'm like, well, I don't know, this was just a couple side projects along the line. But they're trying to convince me that I should hook up my new greenhouse to my pond and pump the water through it and make this giant ecosystem, which might be fun. Yeah, that might be a lot of fun. But permaculture is a really neat aspect of I think future technology and the way to plan communities around sustainability. I think it's fantastic. But a lot of resources go into making it possible up front. You know, you reap the benefits, but a lot of capital investment, right, to really make permaculture work.
The purpose of permaculture being a closed ecosystem, right? Or some sort of ecosystem.
Yeah, basically less inputs, so you're not adding fertilizer or you're using all the waste products. Yeah. Absolutely. So there's different, from what my friends have been teaching me, a whole lot of varieties of how to implement it. But everything from, I know people are very successful in just small, they have small gardens that are plotted off and they rotate animals through behind the plants and immediately the next crop comes up, like the poop and the hooves and everything, mixing things together, and then you plant. and then that's there for 90 days, and then the next they move on. So really simple, fun, experiments like that, down all the way to like water and fish, and aquaculture, like we've been talking about. But I have 30,000 gallons of permaculture going on out here, right outside my little door here.
I do want to talk about that pond. Did the pond has some sort of liner, right, so that the water stays in the pond, or not?
We did. The type of soil we have here in San Diego makes it necessary. You will just get a lot of evaporation. We don't have enough other materials, and we don't have enough natural water to make up for it. So we have a 45 mil liner, and it's the thickness of a mountain bike tire. That's the size of the pond, so it's 50 feet by, I think it was 40 by 50. It weighed, when we brought it in, I think it weighed 800 pounds or 1,000 pounds it was on a giant roller. Took 10 guys to unfold it and to roll it out. And about the time we got it rolled out, it was in the hot sun, and when you touched it, you'd instantly blister your fingers because you're trying to grab onto it, and it was so hot because that black plastic rubber was just holding on to the heat.
I think that day you offloaded it was the day I was very busy, and I
think you were really busy that day. Yeah, you had the kids. I can't remember. Yeah, it was. I don't remember you being here. No.
It's interesting how when you move, you can remember the people who are not there. It's always hard for me to remember who was there, but it's very easy to remember who wasn't there.
Well, we live in two communities separated by a giant gorge, by a river gorge.
It
right?
is
I live like 10 miles from you, but it's 40 miles to get there.
It feels like forever to get to your house. My kids just are like, why? So on my mountain bike ride, I can see your house on the very end of my mountain bike ride. I can look over there and say, "Oh, I think Etienne's right there." That's crazy.
I can see across the canyon.
Can you indulge me a little bit about the pond still, or do you want to move on?
No, that's fine.
So
what do you want to know?
I want to help the person who's listening to this who thought they were going to get a tech conversation.
Oh.
I just want to give them a little bit of a left field sort of topic, which is, and I personally am fascinated by it, so I'm just going to trust.
It has been a really fun learning process, which is what it all is for me, right? Is learning new things. And we put our pond in 3 years ago.
So, but just tell me, Matt, why did you decide to do it?
We were considering putting in a pool, right? Everybody needs to think about a pool if you live in East County, San Diego. And I started investigating that. And I love plants and I love, nature. And so I started to look into the, swimming pond, as they call them, in Europe. And I said, oh, well, this is really interesting. What are the options? And I love do-it-yourself things. I think that's a lot of fun for the family. I wanted something that would, be in not just a pond or a pool, that you'd go, but we really just wanted a place after a long mountain bike ride, come jump in and cool off. The water stays below 70 degrees, around 70 even in the summer. So can you just plunge into this 9-foot deep pond, get cool, and come out? So it was like, okay, we wanted that. We also wanted to have this green, lush backyard. We wanted to experience, the fun of having some fish at the same time. And the fact that I could just rent an excavator on a weekend and dig and crater my entire backyard into a 10-foot deep by 30-foot wide hole, and not get thrown out by my community, it was a benefit.
So I guess it's not permitted.
No, it's just it's not it's not a swimming pool. It's just a hole in the ground.
Now, did you have close moments when you were digging that hole, like life-threatening tipping?
Oh yeah, for sure. It wouldn't be a project at the Ferguson household unless someone almost got electrocuted, or something like that, right?
So, so can you? I know it's 3 years now, but can you just walk me through the stages, like just a brief overview of what it takes to go from just a plain backyard to a lush, gorgeous swimming pool?
Yeah, yeah. First, you send everybody out shopping, and then you spray paint the backyard when they're not looking.
Okay, spray
And
paint
you
the
spray paint
lines.
some lines, and you start imagining where the boundaries would be. And then they come home and
Was
ask
that
you.
fairly simple for you? Just like it's a circle in the middle of my yard, or was it?
Yeah, I mean it's massive. So you have to start thinking about, well, the shallow, the deep. Where's the swimming section going to be versus the plant section? So you have lots of different zones, and then figuring out, the swimming section is very deep versus the plant section has to be, no more than 2 or 3 feet deep. So, and you need to make sure you have enough plant section to keep the water quality good versus the swimming section, which is not doing anything healthy, right? As far as recycling water, because you want, and then, so you really have to figure out, okay, well, what can I fit in my yard? And then there's a big oak tree, how do I work around the roots? Because I don't want to damage that oak tree. And so now you start getting these imaginary shapes that are organic because you're working around organic things in your yard. There's a walkway I want to keep over here. Okay, well, how do I work around all these things? And I think that was really the fun part too, is it got to be a shape that just fit into our yard and the structures we already had. And we just dig out what we wanted.
Okay, so then you rent the thingamajig. What did you call that?
Sorry, what's that?
Well, you rented a thingamajig.
We rented an excavator.
Excavator, and so then.
And which is, we rented kind of a mini excavator, but a long, kind of like a backhoe, but without the blade on the front or
But
without the bucket on the front.
How do you go 10 feet deep with an excavator? Or an excavator is you drive in and drive out, right? Or do you?
Well, the excavator has an arm, so you gotta rent the excavator that's going to go as the depth that you need.
Okay,
and so 10 feet was
10.
the exact,
limit.
For a small excavator, that's it. It took me 3 days to dig it.
Didn't you have any dangerous moments where you wanted to dig the 10 feet and then your thing wanted to tip over?
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, I mean, you're teetering on the very edge trying to get that last foot. And, your family's telling you that you're tipping and you're like, yeah, I'm good. It's okay. But you have a lot of control in an excavator because you can push back and, the bucket's your friend. It's a big thumb sticking out there.
The bucket
but you do have to be careful.
The bucket is the counterweight.
Yeah. And then all that dirt, as you're taking the dirt out, has to go somewhere. So it's becoming this giant mound behind you. So then you have to take a moment and go plow that, where the dirt's going to go, which I had a place for planned 10 years ago. And so that built up my back driveway. And it was quite the process because once you get that hole in the ground and you taper all the edges and you build everything, you get everything ready. You've got to make everything smooth. You can't have rocks. You can't have anything that's going to poke through that liner. It's all got to be smooth. So it's a lot of raking and just hand labor after you get that excavator out. So pretty backbreaking. And then making sure that your swim zone, which is going to be super deep, has a concrete boundary down at the bottom as well.
Okay, so there is a concrete boundary.
Only in the deepest area, yeah, just to hold back the wall because it's a vertical wall down there. It's not a nice. So the pond slopes in, and then it comes to a deep zone, which is the swimming zone.
Okay.
And then around that deep zone, you build up another layer of walls, which are retaining block. But that's after you put in the liner. So you put the liner in, and then on top of the liner, you add walls of retaining block, and behind that, you can fill in with gravel. And in that gravel, you put 4-inch drain pipe that is going to circulate water for you. And so in the lower levels of the gravel is a 4-inch drain pipe, perforated drain pipe, that runs serpentine everywhere. And then over that you put more gravel. Over that you put felt, and then more gravel. And then you, in every corner of the pond's deep zone, we put these air stones that are run off a little tiny air compressor in my shop. And you don't hear it. There's no noise. There's no big, water pump going on. All there is an air stone in every corner with that links to the drain pipe. And that, just like in an aquarium, if your kid's aquarium or if you're into aquariums, when you have bubbles rising in a column, they lift water. And so they create a hydraulic pump that pulls water out of the drain pipe, which is in the gravel. And so that gravel's clean gravel. It never has plants in it. It's under a barrier of felt. And there's all the good bacteria in there. And that's where all of the magic is happening. And you're constantly circulating water through that gravel, that rough gravel with lots of corners where microbes can live. And that's like, the cheap way versus some high-tech fabric or high-tech, medium to create a place for good bacteria to grow. That is really important to keep that water circulating. So we run 4 air stones about the size of a baseball. And, they're just like an air stone, a little tiny one you'd have in a little aquarium, a little bigger. And they run in each corner, and you just see bubbles coming up because there's a pipe that ends right there and a column. And it's turning thousands of gallons of water over a day through that rough gravel. So you don't get any mosquitoes. It's a pond, but because the water's always circulating, there's no place for a mosquito larva because it's not stagnant water. So we don't have those kind of issues. And it probably costs, pennies a day to run to have the pond because we're not running big pumps. Even though we have some waterfalls, we did things later, they're not necessary. They're just there for fun. But we swim out there every day. I mean, just to jump in every day, in the afternoon, just like anybody uses their pool, except we jump in and, you can go underwater and look at fish. We've got plants growing on the very bottom now in the deep zone. So we have plants that are 8 feet tall. They're coming up from the bottom. They're just amazing. And we started them with one little plant this big, and now there are these giant eelgrass that you can swim amongst, and you watch the fish. It's like a Jacques Cousteau show in my backyard.
That's insane.
And if you come over with your kids, you have to take a fish home. That's part of the rules of coming to my house now is the fish breed. And because the water quality is good, the fish are breeding. So it's good. And the other thing we learned a lot about is, some of the insect life we have around here. I've never watched the entire cycle of a dragonfly before. But dragonflies are amazing. The number of cycles they go through and the amount of times that they're able to morph into something new and bigger in our pond and watch them grow from tiny little nymphs to nymphs that look like they're the exact thing that Ridley based the Alien show off of. The monster in Alien looks like a dragonfly nymph, and it's the scariest thing you've ever saw right before it's about ready to hatch and become a dragonfly. But now we have dozens of the big red giant double-winged dragonflies in the pond, and they come back and lay their eggs. And the females only lay their eggs if the water quality is perfect. So you have, we have good water based on the insect saying we do and everything else. But the females, just watching all this and just in the evenings with the kids sitting and observing these things is a lot of fun. It's been very educational. Our kids go to an academy, so they're partially homeschooled some of the week, and science projects are right outside. Water temperature, chlorine, pH, all the measurements, plant growth. I mean, there's always a science project going on from one of the kids based on what we have in the backyard, which has also been fun.
So that was going to be my next question around testing the water. I don't suppose you need to. You can just look at
We do. Yeah, but as long as it's good, it's not that. You can kind of look at it and say, oh, is there an algae bloom going on, or is it perfectly clean? You can kind of know. And then if you're seeing something, because seasonally, during the change of seasons, it can get out of balance a little bit, right? The plants aren't growing yet, but maybe the fish are starting to get more active. So, for a few weeks, there'll always be a little bit of an out of balance. And then all of a sudden it'll stabilize as things catch up, or the water temperature catches up with sunlight. There's so many little sub-ecosystems going on. The shallows, the deeps, the shady areas, the sunny areas. That there's really microclimates in each part of the pond depending on what you're monitoring. So each one of them has a different little bit of a life, and the plants that grow there.
So when you see the algae bloom, you don't freak out and throw chlorine into the water?
I used to. The first time I saw it, I was like, oh my God, what have I done? But now I'm like, wait, I'm just going to wait. Maybe I need to throw some plants over there. Usually it's just, we need to throw some more plants in. Let's move some things around. Let's figure out, do we have too much sunlight there? But the deep zone never gets algae. It's just maybe in a shallow area that is getting hot. Too much sunshine. But once the water is covered with plants and has underwater plants, the algae can't compete. I mean, the algae is always there, right? Just like yeast. It's always ready to come back and make that next loaf of bread. But as long as something else is eating its food, you're all fine.
So, what is the purpose of a dragonfly?
Oh, they're just really pretty.
We have a lot of them here, and I always wonder, so, hey, what's your purpose, little guy?
They're like the apex insect predator, I think.
I do wonder if it's Homeland Security checking our immigrant status with bionic robots.
They're very majestic,
They are. They. I'll have to Google. I suppose in this age, I should just Google it. But I was hoping you could give me a delicious homemade pond answer.
Well, we have, if we're careful, every summer, the dragonflies get tame enough that you can pet them.
Wow.
So they get used to us, the kids running and jumping and cannonballing into the pond. And I grew some very tall cattails, bulrushes next to the diving jumping platform. And the dragonflies will sit up there on those, and they'll be right at shoulder level when you walk by. And you do that enough and you don't touch them, and they just stay there and they look at you. And eventually you can just stop, and they're right there. And eventually you can start reaching over and you can stroke their back. It takes, a week or two of the kids just kind of desensitizing them. And then, for an insect to let you pet it, there's a whole nother brain. It makes you wonder a little bit, right?
Maybe that is how the Alien movie started, was when Ridley Scott did that. It's like, wait, this is interesting. No, I appreciate digging into that, because I just think I'm a student of ecosystems, and just listening to how you handle algae, for instance, as a way to say, not I see something bad, I've got to get rid of it, versus how is this an opportunity to fix the ecosystem, as an example. So then you built we're not going to get into this, but you built the greenhouse, right?
I did. That was
Why
the
did you do
suburbs.
that?
That was my response to the COVID craziness. Was I'm going to immerse myself in building another structure. So,
is it because you wanted to grow your own food?
No. It's simply to make sure that I wanted to make sure the kids had a garden place to learn about growing food. But it's sort of, growing food's great. And I think that's fun. But come on, grocery stores are a way cheaper way to get food when you really add up the time and effort and dollars. But on the other hand, I think it's a really important way to, just everybody connecting with nature and understanding, how hard it is to grow food, and the watering, the whole experience. And it's just valuable and rewarding on its own, let alone that you get to have that one carrot that actually survives.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. We're doing it that way. We have a pool that we've got to dump ungodly amounts of chlorine into. We have a vegetable garden that, just the soil is constantly needs to be nurtured, and the yield is always a lot less than you would hope it to be, and just the ecosystem just feels unhealthy because you have these trails of ants, and you have night crawl. It just doesn't feel healthy. It doesn't feel like there's something healthy going on. Now, if you go beneath the leaves of the squashes and the pumpkins, and this feels like there's something beautiful happening down there, but certainly on the surface it's not great.
Well, when you start a garden in East County, San Diego, you're basically creating a patch of green in the middle of a desert. And so every carnivore, everything that wants to eat green is attracted for, a half mile around you or 100 yards around you. And it's hard to avoid that, which has been our lesson. But we're getting better at it, and we trying not to use too many chemicals to solve that problem.
Yeah, and then before I move on to the little IoT project you did,
Yeah.
is there something about the pond that is kind of gross? Like you just did not anticipate this? Like there's 10-foot eel growing at the bottom of the pool, or there's like something is attracted to it at 4 a.m, and you're like, there's just something about it that you're like, I could have lived without this.
Well, we do have trees. We love having a lot of nice trees in our yard. We've been blessed by that. And in the fall, everybody says, oh yeah, ponds are great as long as you don't have trees. And the reason they say that is in the fall, when the leaves come down, guess where all the leaves go? They don't just blow around your yard anymore. They touch the water and it's magnet, right? They don't go anywhere. So in the fall, we have, weekly, we have to kind of clean. And it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, but it's a little work,
Frogs.
And you can't just forget about it. It's like, we'll get that in the spring. No, you got to get them out because they don't decompose
how
well.
about tadpoles and frogs?
We did have a bit of a frogageddon. It was my fault for getting some frogs, and it took a long time to eradicate frogs.
Okay, well I do love talking to you about that project because I basically saw you do it, and so it was quite amazing to see that.
Well, it's been super rewarding, and everything's really tied together. The whole backyard is just like really interesting, and it's very you step out of the pond, you can grab a bucket of pond water to go pour on the plants. It's really fun.
And then do you have to refill? You have to refill the pond, right, with water?
Yeah, you have to top it off just like a pool, right? And especially with all the vegetation, it's breathing all the time, right? So it's even more so than a pool. You get a lot of evaporation.
So then you took this beautiful natural ecosystem and then you added some high tech to it, didn't you? With IoT.
Well, the IoT that I'm doing is around water recycling for a company here in San Diego, not around my pond. And that has been a neat project. I have a background working in the water industry for about 8 years in the utility space as software provider and hardware provider to utilities. So it's been kind of neat to rekindle those roots and work with a company here in San Diego that is building a water reclamation system for use in, everything from, breweries and food operations, food factories to the military who need to recycle water into some, maybe not potable or potentially potable after that with a few more steps, but can go back in the environment at that point. It's not sewage. And so they have the company AquaCycle is doing a great job. Fantastic folks who are the founders of the technology, and we're helping with the building out the gateway that monitors each of these platforms. So all the work they're doing and that they've pioneered needs to be monitored when it's on site. And so monitoring, over 600 reactors that are organically cleaning water through biotechnology, and measuring the voltage, but also watching the hydraulics. And what was fascinating about getting involved in this project was realizing that the team that needs to be able to access these sites needs to be able to interact with that data and tweak things that are going on. It's a living system, and they still want to be able to massage how the system's working and react to things. So we spent some time thinking about how to design this, and we decided to go with some technologies that would enable them to, as operators, not have to ask for an engineer, to recode something. So what are the building block technologies, the Legos, that would allow them to really interact with what's going on? And obviously, that's it can be a lower cost solution if you're able to build from off the shelf technologies, which is great, but also a more flexible solution in some ways if you're focusing on the capture of data, the storage of data, and then the visualization of data. And if you can design that, each of those things, the ability to see what's been stored is available to an operator, and the ability to visualize is something an operator can reconfigure. So the IoT space is pretty interesting. There's a lot of work that's been covered there, over the many years. But how to do that, right? So that you could take a scientist or an operator who isn't a software engineer and give them control over all that data and the visualization. And we settled on some cool technologies. I'm actually watching it on my screen here because the test harness is firing away. And what we're using some tools, stream sheets from Sedalo, which is a German company that has developed these microservices that you can just configure like a spreadsheet to transform data and push that data into off-the-shelf tools like an InfluxDB, and then wire that up to Grafana for visualization. So we were able to architect a solution for them that doesn't require a software engineer now or in the future. It's a lot of configuration to get it off the ground, to design it right, but our vision is that as they roll out system after system, this is going to be very flexible, and something that they're going to say, oh, I need a chart for this. Oh, let me go find that. And, they can create the visualizations, the alarms, and everything without writing code. It's the ultimate in being able to cut out that middle layer of complexity and get the operator immediately involved in the data. And
the concern I feel when I hear that is, the development team has a lot of fun putting these building blocks in place, but then the end user can't bridge the gap to actually doing what you just described. So how is it, do you just train them, or do you have to have a special kind of user that's willing to jump in and work on this unknown system? Or because there's no code doesn't mean that it's still a scary system to the end user, right?
Well, there's the benefit in this system that there's a human machine interface, very LCD, that's sitting over here for if somebody is at the system and they don't have any understanding of the data, and they just want to push the red button, or they just want to see, what's going on. But the operators who need to dial in are more sophisticated and understand, how the system's connected. So there's a little bit of both, right? And I think that we're taking advantage of the fact that the folks that are dialing in or need to work with the system are a super user, if you will, right?
Yeah.
And they are truly someone who understands, when the system is cycling like this and we're getting this many millivolts out of the bacteria that's processing through the water, then it has a meaning. And obviously that user is a sophisticated user, but it's part of why you would be in the back end of the system, right?
Okay.
Now the thing is things like as soon as you open up the world of flexible reporting, right, you always run into that situation where I can build something I don't understand, or so it's a double-edged sword, like what you're saying, right? If you expose it all, then are we really enabling someone to do something that shouldn't be done? In our case, we happen to have, we're not actually creating a system that allows them to manipulate, just create reports, dashboards, and alerts. Monitor.
Which in your case, just in the low code or the no code approach enabled you to do it just quickly without like buggy software that has to be patched, and you were able to just build it in a sort of a low code environment for your own maintenance.
Absolutely. Yeah. Stand up and focus more on building test harnesses, and focus on making it very, very solid, and less on the intricacies of, taking a systems approach instead of I'm a software engineer approach that I'm going to, this is the tool I know, therefore I should always use that hammer, which I could talk about for the next hour and a half if you'd like. But, it's always, I've just seen it too much in the past little while of, how much when we are masters of one tool, that's the tool we're going to use. And I don't think code is always the answer. Even as a software engineer and a CTO, when we are reaching out for third parties, right, we're already saying, hey, somebody's already done this. How do I wire it up? And a lot of our time is now spent in writing those wiring it up code, and so how can we do that for as software gets more advanced and software starts writing itself? I think that's what we will spend more time doing. I don't think you'll ever see that we don't need software engineers, but more and more of our time will be in that wiring up part of the solution.
Well, it's I mean, isn't that what we do as software developers anyway? I mean, we're using open source package. I mean, we're wiring up packages or libraries anyway.
Yep.
And so that little thin layer of business logic that we're used to coding, and we call it software development when really we're just finding packages and we're just using whatever's out there to add that thin layer of business logic, hopefully in a small service that you have multiple of. We're just saying that the low code approach is really just doing it at the application level, maybe. Same thing.
Yeah.
That's why I think tooling is so important in our role as CTO. We have to be aware of the tools that are out there, man. How do you stay plugged into the tools? Like, how did you find the tools that you used to do this water monitoring thing?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I've built an IoT platform, I guess now 10 years ago, that reads all the meters in entire parts of the country. And so I've been through the days where we had to write everything ourselves, And so when I was envisioning, this much more smaller platform in this microsystem, we really, what I was thinking about was I don't want to reinvent the wheel. And I think that's an important thing for all of us to ask ourselves is, as soon as we start a project, break it down into the component pieces, data, movement of data, display of data. And how do you solve those three problems based in the domain you're in? Are you a data company? Are you and then what is your core competency, right? What's the business you're in? So the tools, how do you stay up? You can't stay up on all the tools. I think that what you can do is say, I have a framework for finding and investigating this domain when I need it. And if it's every 5 years, that's fine, but do you have a process that says, I'm at least going to go spend half an afternoon coming up with candidates, and then I can go narrow that down to, either with my team or with some other criteria to say, oh, these are interesting. And so that's what I did. I didn't believe that this thing I had, found out there from Sedalo was truly going to be what my final solution was. I assumed I was going to end up writing a bunch of code, or my team was. And in this case, I started to build a proof of concept around it. And I was kind of blown away. I was like, well, maybe this will work. And, so I think the proof of concept is an important part of the process. Whether you're investigating Kafka or messaging, or, in this case, we're using MQTT. But when you're in that domain, go build these simple proof of concepts, prove to yourself it's possible. Ask your team to do that same thing, right? I don't think you can just read a book, though, or take others' recommendations. It's not good enough. There's a lot of false prophets out there.
Yes, and it's also very hard to measure whether someone actually understood the problem. And I think with our engineers, if we just show them that we want to collaborate with them on the prototype, and that it's not it's not a delegation to grind them down or make them unhappy, but that it's a collaborative experience. Like, hey, let's see if we can build this quick prototype, and I'm here to help and 1+ you versus it's your job to go and figure it out, and by the way, you can't use these tools and you got to go find these tools. I think as in our roles as leaders, it is important to show that we are really interested in that technical solution.
Yeah, there's a lot of good examples of that. I think right now it's probably the biggest part of our jobs, right, is to do that coaching. I mean, I think I've seen this technology stack that I'm in is unique to this solution, but also at Galley, we just reinvented our CI/CD pipeline, and I've always been a big believer in GitOps, and I've implemented GitOps sort of hand woven previously, and with lots of good technology, but still I was like, oh man, there's too much code here, or too much, of our own secret sauce making this work. And so we investigated and, looked at a bunch of technologies and realized that, Argo was the solution we wanted to go with. Did a proof of concept, and we're like, oh my gosh, this really solves a bunch of things that we were going to have to do. We knew what we wanted to accomplish, but this does it, without us reinventing a lot of these wheels. So there's always these great solutions, and, packages like Argo that have big corporate sponsors are, fantastic. Fortunately, we live in a space that does have corporate sponsorship, for these open source solutions, because, the CTOs of these organizations realize that's not my core competency. It'd be better to hand that over to the open source community and make that, if we look at Kafka, where did Kafka come from, right? LinkedIn. And solving a LinkedIn problem, but then they realize that's not our core competency. It's that technology is better served in the wild with a team that's going to become service that team. Argo, same thing. There you can just see it all over the place. Supporting technologies that have been put out into the wild, after being incubated somewhere. It's a great, beautiful way to go.
Yeah, by the way, if you touch the table, it's doing a bit of a bump in the audio when you touch the table.
Got it.
Got it. Nick, you can remove that. Okay, so just to touch on that briefly, the CI/CD pipelines, it is kind of shocking how complex the one can get. And one thing I've noticed is that there's an exponential correlation between complexity and developers' fears to touch the CI/CD pipeline. I mean, they get afraid, really afraid, even worse than that crazy recursive piece of code that no one wants to touch. If the pipeline is complex, then no one wants to do a production push, and everyone's afraid of a rollback.
As they
so
should
Argo solves that?
I think Argo does a very good job of solving that, more so than I've seen in other platforms. We're now, we have one-click rollbacks. That was one of the things we asked. Was like when we were investigating it, for example, was, well, we don't ever want to do a rollback, but if we have to, how hard is it? You can always deploy that image, if you have to, but what are you going to do? We now have one-click rollbacks. We have one-click, increase the Kubernetes pod count, for a particular service. It's every piece of configuration is in a repo. So you're managing configuration in repos in GitHub. And that's a beautiful thing to say, the number of pods is in a repo, and if I merge a change to the number of pods, that's going to trigger Argo to change that configuration. So everything is a Git, right, ops. And that's fascinating, right? And so simple. And it's separating the complexity of doing it versus the where I store what I want. And so as a developer, if I can separate those two things and not, commingle, the intent with the implementation, the intent is a configuration file and environment variables, and the implementation of how to get it done is over here, then I can teach the entire team, where to make the change and feel comfortable, right? Because there's also visualizations and a cute little UI, and makes it just much more accessible.
So can you give a quick overview of where Argo fits in a typical pipeline? Is it am I confusing it with Terraform and tools like that? Is it in the same category?
Yeah, those are all those are complementary technologies, not so Terraform is a wonderful scripting tool for managing Kubernetes. There are others. AWS, among other things, but AWS and your actual cloud platform. And then you've got things like Kubernetes with kubectl that are managing Kubernetes potentially if you're using Kubernetes as your container strategy. Which there's also tools that can sit on top of that Argo can talk to in a more sophisticated way. But what Argo is doing is just the orchestrator, right? It's just keeping track and saying, I'm going to watch all these repos. I can watch a repo for your code, and if that code changes, I can, and Jenkins goes and builds it, then I will take it and deploy it for you. When that image gets built, I have a repo for images, and when you put a new image there, I know what to do with that, right? So somehow there's a new image, I know what to do. Or the number of pods that you want. Now, Argo doesn't know how to actually change the pod count, but it knows if it sees that the pod count has changed, could go tell kubectl, to run this command with kubectl. So Argo is the glue, the build and the deploy and the configuration changes. It doesn't do the build, right? It doesn't execute actually the configuration change, but it can call all the tools.
So
all due to GitHub triggers.
Okay, and so what do you, for instance, use for the build?
We're a Jenkins shop.
Oh, Jenkins. Okay,
Yeah.
so Circle CI or any kind of...
Yeah, pick one.
So Argo lives in harmony with those, the build tools, the pipeline tools.
Yeah.
But Argo monitors repositories and then trains your developer culture to be one of committing config changes,
Yep.
committing images.
Right.
So then do you tool Jenkins then to commit the image then to a repo? Okay.
Exactly. So as part of your Jenkins pipeline, when you build that image, you put it in a repo, right? You're updating.
That's a
repo.
delicious separation of complexity, because now you're not having Jenkins run some doofus deploy script.
Yeah, it really centralizes down the Jenkins responsibility, right?
I love it.
Yeah, it's massively. You're also massively decomplexing things. And I think the separation of environment variables from code, right? We all say we should do that, but now there's a repo for your environment variables. And that's a whole nother world, right?
That is a whole nother world. I mean, configuring environment variables in Circle CI is...
Yeah, I mean, when you build that first project as a developer, and you see the how I should build and how I should test and how I should deploy, and let's just say you're using Node, right? And your environment variables are buried in there, and maybe your test scripts are buried in your code, and your deployment environment variables are buried in there. I mean, I look at that and I'm like, no, I want my code over here. I want my environment variables over here, because these might change, but my code might not. And as soon as you commingle them, you end up with the complexity, which is why everyone is scared to touch their CI/CD pipeline. If you can separate those things and say, hey, code is code. Environment variables over here, configuration over here. I mean, that it really simplifies the solution.
But does that mean that you're committing secrets to a repo?
I mean, you have to manage secrets with a secret strategy, never in a repo. No, you don't have to do that. You have to inject secrets just like you do with Jenkins or with any of the tools. You got to manage that in a special way.
So then, what do you mean by environment variables being in their own, being?
Well, you might have environment variables, or just like I just mentioned, like how many pods.
Okay.
Right,
got it.
A good one might be
config variables or.
Yeah, secrets are a whole other animal for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, because the problem is when we configure it in Circle CI, you can't see it after you've configured it, so it's gone. So you need your secrets. This is why you have your, I don't know what AWS has, has some secrets manager or something.
They have
right?
secrets manager, yeah.